Picture a garden in Richmond, just outside London. String lights glowing between the trees. A string quartet tuning up somewhere behind a hedge. A bride stands with her hand in her grandmother's, and in a few minutes she's going to marry a man she once thought couldn't afford a proper winter coat. That's not a metaphor, she genuinely thought that. For 4 months, this man mopped up spilled coffee, held doors open in the rain, and got barked at by people who wouldn't have looked at him twice on the street. And the strange thing is, none of that was an act of desperation. It was a test, one his own mother designed, for reasons that will make a lot more sense by the end of this video. Here's the question I want you to sit with while this story unfolds. If you found out tomorrow that the quietest, most overlooked person in your office was worth more than the entire building, would you be relieved you'd been kind to them? Or would you be praying they'd forgotten how you treated them? Keep that question in your pocket. We're going to come back to it. Let's rewind 5 months. Eleanor Harrington did not inherit her company. She built it brick by brick, contract by contract, starting with a single logistics firm in Manchester in the early 1990s, and turning it, over 3 decades, into Harrington Group, a shipping and property conglomerate with offices from Leeds to Liverpool, and a glass headquarters overlooking the Thames that most Londoners could pick out of a skyline photo without being told what it was. People who'd worked with her described her the same way, almost word for word. Brilliant, unforgiving of laziness, and somehow warmer in private than her reputation ever let on. She'd buried a husband 12 years earlier and thrown herself into the business, partly, everyone suspected, because grief needed somewhere to go. She had one child, a son, Nathaniel. Nathaniel Harrington was 33, sharp enough to have finished his MBA a year early, and by every objective measure, ready to take the reins of the family business. He'd grown up in a house with a driveway longer than most people's gardens, gone to boarding schools with names that opened doors on their own, and never once, as far as Eleanor could tell, let any of it turn him arrogant. And that was exactly what worried her, because Eleanor knew something a lot of wealthy parents refused to admit to themselves. A comfortable life doesn't teach you anything about how the world actually treats people who don't have one. You can be kind by nature and still be dangerously ignorant of what your own employees go through every single day, simply because you've never had to find out. So on a Tuesday evening, over tea that had long gone cold in her office, Eleanor made her son an offer that had nothing to do with boardrooms. "I want you to work inside this company for 6 months," she said. "Not as an executive, as a front-of-house security officer. Nobody knows who you are. Not your surname, not your face outside a badge photo, nothing. You clock in, you open doors, you carry parcels, and you properly find out, what it's like to be the person everyone else in that building looks straight through." Nathaniel laughed, assuming it was a strange kind of joke. It wasn't. "And if I say no?" he asked. Eleanor's answer was simple. "Then I'm not sure you're ready to run this company. Because running it isn't just knowing the balance sheet, it's knowing your people. And you can't know people you've never had to stand beside." He said yes, before he'd finished his tea. 3 weeks later, the polished young executive in waiting had vanished. In his place stood a quieter man in a plain navy uniform, hair cut short, driving a battered hatchback instead of anything with a badge on the bonnet, stationed at the front entrance of Harrington Group's London headquarters, with a name tag that simply read, Nate. His first morning taught him more than 4 years of business school had. People streamed past without a glance, A man shoved an empty coffee cup into his hands, no please, no eye contact, and walked off as if Nate were a bin with legs. A woman complained, apparently to him personally, that the lift was too slow, as though he had any control over decades-old engineering. Someone else blamed him for the weather. He held the door, said good morning, and absorbed it all, filing every reaction away, not out of bitterness, but out of genuine curiosity. This is who these people actually are, he thought, when they think it costs them nothing to be unkind. Among the worst offenders was a woman from the marketing department named Camilla Ashworth. Camilla was sharp-witted, expensively dressed, and universally regarded, by herself mostly, as one of the rising stars of the company. She had a habit of clicking her fingers at Nate as though summoning a waiter, calling him door boy without breaking stride, and treating every interaction with him as beneath her notice. Her small entourage of colleagues would snicker along. Nate never argued. He simply opened the door, said nothing, and let the moment pass. But he was learning. Not plotting revenge, learning. Filing away, quietly, exactly who these people became when they believed no one who mattered was watching. Weeks in, exhausted after a particularly brutal Tuesday, heavy rain, a wet umbrella shoved into his hands with a curt, "Hold this," a coffee complaint that had nothing to do with him. Nate sat alone in a corner of the lobby at lunchtime, too tired to bother finding food. A voice interrupted his thoughts. You know, people actually function better when they eat. He looked up. A woman was standing there, dark hair, an easy smile, dressed smartly but without any of the performative polish he'd grown used to seeing in that building. She held out half a sandwich. "You haven't eaten, have you? You noticed?" "You'd be surprised what people notice," she said, "when they actually bother paying attention." Her name was Grace Whitmore. She worked 2 floors up in operations, and without any fuss at all, she sat down beside him, not across from him like a benefactor doing a good deed, but beside him like an equal. It was such a small gesture. It would turn out to be the hinge the entire story swung on. From that day, Grace made a habit of greeting him properly every single morning, rain or shine, meeting or no meeting. She learned his coffee order without being told. She thanked the receptionists by name, held lifts for strangers, and treated the cleaning staff exactly the same way she treated her department head, which is to say, like people. Nate noticed, because it was the first time in weeks anyone had treated him like one. One evening, long after most of the building had emptied out, Nate spotted Grace loading grocery bags into an old car that had clearly seen better decades. "Working late again?" he asked, jogging over to help. "Story of my life," she said, with a tired smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. He carried her bags. He noticed the boxes of medication on the passenger seat. When he asked, gently, she told him. Her grandmother, the woman who'd raised her after her parents died, had been unwell for years, and Grace was the only one managing her care. Rent, medicine, hospital appointments, all of it stacked on top of a full-time job, carried without complaint, without asking anyone for help. That night, something shifted in Nate. Here was a woman working harder than almost anyone in that building, quietly holding an entire family together, and somehow she still had the energy to notice when a stranger in a security uniform hadn't eaten lunch. Meanwhile, people earning triple her salary spent their days complaining that the lift was slow. It wasn't her beauty that moved him, though she was striking. It was the plain fact that she had a good heart in a building that didn't ask for one. Camilla noticed the shift too, Not the tenderness in it, just the pattern. The doorman, who'd never once flirted back at her, seemed to light up whenever Grace walked past. That bothered her more than she wanted to admit. Men noticed Camilla, always had. So why not him? She decided quietly that this was a problem worth fixing. A few months into the arrangement, Eleanor Harrington called her son up to her office through a private entrance, well after most staff had gone home, for one of their regular debriefs. He told her everything. The casual cruelty, the small kindnesses, the employees who blamed him for the weather, and the ones who slipped him a biscuit or a cheers mate without thinking twice. Eleanor listened the way she always did, quietly cataloguing names. People show you who they are, she told him, the moment they think it costs them nothing. What neither of them noticed was Camilla, retrieving a forgotten handbag from the corridor outside, freezing mid-step as she glimpsed through the half-open door. Eleanor Harrington, the most powerful woman in the company, embracing the security guard like family. "I'm proud of you, son," Eleanor said. Camilla's stomach dropped. "Son." She stood frozen in the hallway as the pieces slotted together. The doorman she'd mocked for months, the man she'd clicked her fingers at, was the sole heir to Harrington Group. And in that instant, shame was nowhere in her. What arrived instead was something colder. Opportunity. Camilla barely slept that night, and by morning she'd made a decision. The Invisible Man had become, overnight, the most eligible bachelor in London, and she intended to be the one standing beside him when the truth came out publicly. She arrived the next day with a caramel latte he'd apparently mentioned liking. He hadn't, and a warmth so sudden and syrupy it startled half the office. She laughed at jokes he hadn't made yet. She complimented his tie. By lunchtime, colleagues were exchanging confused glances, wondering what on earth had happened to Camilla Ashworth overnight. Nate wasn't fooled for a second. Months of watching people reveal themselves had made him fluent in the difference between warmth and performance, and this was unmistakably the latter. Grace noticed too, and felt something she didn't expect. A small, unwelcome twist of jealousy. Not because she believed Nate belonged to her, but because their easy friendship had quietly become the best part of her week, and watching someone else angle for his attention stung more than she was ready to admit. So, in the quiet way she handled most things, Grace began to step back. Shorter conversations, no more shared lunches, still a smile every morning, but a smaller one, with distance behind it. When Nate finally caught up with her by the lifts and asked what he'd done wrong, Grace forced a smile that didn't hold. "You seem happy," she said, "and Camilla seems very interested in you. I just don't want to complicate things." He nearly laughed at the idea. Camilla. But the lift doors opened before he could say a word, and Grace was gone. Camilla's campaign escalated. She began announcing to colleagues, with a knowing little smile, that she and Nate had been seeing each other privately. Within a day, half the office was congratulating them. Nate was stunned. "We are not dating," he said flatly, the first time someone brought it up to his face. Standing a few feet away, unnoticed, Grace heard every word of the rumor, though not, crucially, his denial. It landed like confirmation of exactly what she'd feared. Quietly, she turned and walked away, and for the first time since they'd met, Nate didn't even see her leave. That night, at her grandmother's kitchen table, Grace admitted, for the first time out loud, that she thought she'd fallen for someone she could never have. Her grandmother, unimpressed, told her plainly, "That's one of the daftest things I've heard in 80 years of living. You don't get to decide what someone else's heart wants." Grace smiled at the advice and ignored it entirely. By the following Friday, exhausted by mounting medical bills, a dying car, and what she believed was a closed door, she sat at her desk and began drafting her resignation. Eleanor found out about the resignation letter before her son did. She generally found out about most things before anyone else did, and called him upstairs immediately. "The woman you're hopelessly in love with is about to hand in her notice," she told him, sliding the letter across the desk. "How did you... I'm your mother. And frankly, darling, you have never been subtle." She told him, not unkindly, to stop thinking like an heir for 5 minutes and start thinking like a man who was about to lose something he actually cared about. Meanwhile, downstairs, Camilla had grown dangerously confident. She was already imagining herself as Mrs. Harrington, browsing property listings on her phone during meetings, telling a friend on the phone that once she married Nate, she'd never have to work another day in her life. She didn't realize Nate was standing just outside the door and had heard every word. What he felt wasn't anger. It was disappointment, the quiet, final kind. The woman chasing him had never been interested in him at all, only in what came attached to his surname. That evening, the skies over London opened properly, the kind of rain that turns umbrellas useless, and Grace's ancient car finally gave up entirely, stranding her at a bus stop with wet shoes and a resignation letter in her bag. She let herself cry, quietly, for the first time in longer than she could remember. Not because she was weak, because she was tired of being the strong one for everybody, all the time. Someone sat down beside her. "You know," Nate said, "buses are wildly overrated." She looked up, startled. "What are you doing here? You forgot to mention your car broke down." Despite everything, she laughed. What followed was the most honest conversation either of them had had in months. He asked why she was leaving. She admitted she thought it would be easier for everyone. Easier for him, specifically, who deserved someone who could offer more than she could. "Why do you keep deciding what I deserve?" he asked her. "Because I'm scared," she finally admitted, "of loving someone and losing them." "Good," he said, "because I'm terrified too." He took off his jacket and put it over her shoulders, and as the rain kept falling, neither of them noticed the elderly woman standing under the next shelter along, watching quietly with a small, satisfied smile before boarding her bus and murmuring to herself, "Finally." That woman, of course, was Eleanor Harrington. The next morning, Nate arrived at work, lighter than he had in weeks. Camilla, misreading his mood entirely, decided it was time to formalize things, arriving with a gift bag and a speech about how everyone already knows how special we are. In front of a lobby full of colleagues, Nate finally said, plainly and without cruelty, what he'd been too polite to say for weeks. There was no relationship. There never had been. He'd let the rumors slide because he hadn't wanted to embarrass her publicly, a courtesy she had not extended to him. Humiliated, Camilla stormed off, and from that moment, resentment took root where ambition used to live. She still had one card left to play. The secret only she knew. That night, alone in her flat, Camilla stared at photographs she'd secretly taken of Nate and Eleanor together. Originally, she'd hoped that knowledge might buy her a way into the family. Now she wanted something else entirely, for Grace to lose everything the way she felt she just had. By morning, an anonymous email had reached half the company, a photo attached, one line beneath it. "The Doorman isn't who you think he is." The building erupted into speculation. Nephew? Assistant? Some elaborate corporate stunt? Nobody guessed the truth. Even Grace, shown the photo by a colleague, felt only confusion, not suspicion. She knew Nate too well by then to imagine he'd been lying to her. Upstairs, board members panicked about reputational damage. Eleanor, notably, didn't. Sometimes, she told them calmly, the truth arrives exactly when it's supposed to. She'd already decided the 6 months were over. By early afternoon, an emergency company-wide meeting had been called, and the auditorium at Harrington Group's headquarters filled with hundreds of confused, whispering employees. Camilla sat near the front, quietly satisfied. Whatever happened next, she reasoned, she'd known first. Grace sat near the back, worried only that something bad had happened, not remotely prepared for what came next. Eleanor took the stage and, without theatrics, explained that for 6 months she had run a quiet experiment inside her own company to answer one question. Who are we when we believe nobody important is watching? Then she called her son up by name. Gasps rolled through the room as the man in the security uniform, now in a sharp navy suit, walked to the stage. Eleanor introduced him not as an employee, but as her son, and the future of Harrington Group. She didn't stop there. She spoke, without naming anyone specifically at first, about the employees who had shown arrogance and cruelty over the past 6 months, and about one woman in particular who had shown the opposite, who'd cared for a sick relative while working herself to exhaustion, and who had treated a man she believed had nothing exactly the same as she treated everyone else. Miss Grace Whitmore, Eleanor said, would you join us? Grace's legs barely carried her to the stage. When she reached it, Nate spoke directly to her in front of the entire company about the sandwich, the lunches, the kindness that never asked what it might get in return, and told her in front of everyone that somewhere in the middle of all of it, he'd fallen in love with her. The room erupted. Camilla sat frozen, watching the life she'd imagined for herself collapse in real time. Eleanor wasn't finished. She announced immediate changes to how the company treated its people. Managers who'd abused their position would lose their roles. Staff who'd shown quiet decency, some of whom had gone unnoticed for years, would be recognized and promoted. Then, gently but directly, she addressed the leak. Camilla, she said, had been given every opportunity to act with integrity and had instead chosen to weaponize a secret out of jealousy. Before Eleanor could say more, Nate stepped in. I'm not interested in revenge, he said quietly. People make mistakes. He looked at Camilla and told her, without malice, that he hoped one day she'd understand that genuine affection can't be bought. Camilla's employment ended that day. She left without arguing, pausing only to tell Grace, through tears, that she was sorry. Grace, who had never carried bitterness well, or at all, told her simply, I forgive you, and meant it. With the hard part of the afternoon behind them, Eleanor turned back to her son with a knowing look. I believe, she said, there was something you wanted to say. In front of the same room that had gasped at his identity 20 minutes earlier, Nate got down on one knee. He told Grace that he'd started this whole strange experiment looking for the truth about people, and had found something far better than he'd expected. That she'd loved him when she believed he had nothing to offer. That somewhere between shared lunches, bad coffee, and one soaking wet evening at a bus stop, he couldn't picture his life without her. Grace said yes before he'd even finished opening the box. The wedding, months later, was held in a garden in Richmond, the very scene this story opened on. Every former colleague was invited, including those who'd made mistakes along the way, because Nate and Grace had agreed on one thing early. People deserve room to grow. Partway through the ceremony, a small commotion rippled through the guests. Camilla had arrived, quietly, without the designer polish she used to wear like armor, without an ounce of her old confidence. "I shouldn't be here," she said softly, stopping a few feet from Grace. Grace raised a hand gently. "It's all right. I just wanted to say thank you," Camilla continued. "Losing everything taught me something I should have known a long time ago. Real love doesn't chase status. Real kindness doesn't need an audience." She apologized again, said she didn't expect forgiveness, only wanted to stop running from what she'd done. Grace, without a word, hugged her. No grand speech, just closure. Camilla offered a quiet, "Congratulations," and left, this time not in shame, but in something closer to peace. The ceremony continued. Vows were exchanged. And as the sun dropped behind the London skyline that evening, Nate and Grace stood together. Just the two of them. No cameras, no crowd. "Do you think it all happened the way it was supposed to?" Grace asked. Nate thought about it. About 6 months of being invisible, about half a sandwich on a bad day, about a bus stop in the rain. "I think," he said, "we were exactly where we needed to be to find each other. Somewhere out there tonight, people are still being judged by their job titles, their postcode, the car they drive, or the uniform they happen to be wearing. This story, and it's a story built from a real pattern that plays out in offices everywhere, even if the names here have been changed, is really about one simple, unfashionable idea. The way you treat someone who can do absolutely nothing for you is the truest measure of who you are. Kindness is never wasted, even when it feels invisible. Especially then. If this one landed for you, let me know in the comments what you'd have done in Grace's position. And stick around, because the next story in this series takes a very different turn.